Hi, this is Lou, welcome to my channel, and today I'm going to be painting some landscapes in watercolour. And then I've got some pens, I'm going to embellish them with some really simple detail. I want these to be really calming, simple and beautiful, and I hope that you'll paint them along with me. So to start with, I've taped off an area on my 3 pieces of watercolour paper, and I'm using cotton watercolour paper here, which will allow me to paint with lots of water and give me time for it to work. For this first one, I'm taking Indigo, and I've got quite a lot of it on my brush with a fair bit of water. And I'm running that backwards and forwards with my brush, right across the width of the page. What I'm hoping to gain here is a really deep, rich blue ocean. That's what I'm going for. I want it to be darker as it comes towards the horizon. So every time I pick up paint on my brush, I'm painting that horizon line first, and then moving the brush backwards and forwards through the wet paint and bringing it closer and closer to me. So as I keep going, I'm just making that same repetitive motion backwards and forwards, mimicking the calming backwards and forwards of the ocean waves. By doing this, I should achieve a really rich, deep colour at the top of the page, where it's still very wet. And then I can bring the colour forwards, and it gets lighter and lighter as it reaches the bottom of the page. Now you could leave this dry brush effect at the bottom. It does look like the sparkles of light on the waves. But I decide that I want mine to be all blue, going from dark to light. So I make another couple of passes with the brush until I can bring that colour right down to the bottom. My next step is to add a little bit of colour into the sky, and so without washing my brush properly, just dipping it in the water, still with a little bit of that indigo on it, I make a few swishes through the sky. And I do decide to run my brush very, very close to the sea, allowing it to touch at a couple of points. That gives you very unpredictable effects, because you don't know whether the sky will seep into the sea or the other way around. This is how it looks when it's dry. I've got that lovely velvety indigo sea, and then I've got a bleed from where I allowed the sea and the sky to touch. And I decide that this bleed looks very, very like Bass Rock, which is a rock formation off the coast of Edinburgh, which is home to a colony of gannets. And usually the top of it is completely white because that's what gannets do. So I decide that I'm going to make my little unexpected bleed here into a gannet colony, and I use my Posca marker in white just to add a white top and a few details on the side. And then I darken the side with a black pen to show some of the cliffs that are on there. I go back in with the white pen to add lines to the sea. start with a ruler to give me a straight line on the horizon, but I want my lines to look more freehand, so I go over it again with the white pen. And then I go through the slow and steady process of drawing lines, just straight lines, below one another. I wanted the sea to be really, really dark because I knew I wanted to put these white lines on top of them, and I wanted to create a really nice contrast. You can see I'm not drawing the lines all in one go. I'm just taking my time with them. And I want there to be little wiggles and slight undulations in the lines. And as I go, I'm ever so slightly increasing the distance between the lines as I get further and further down the page. It's quite a challenge to work out how to do this, to just make one line ever so slightly further away than its neighbours. That's part of the process that I quite like, is figuring that out. And enjoying it when it breaks that rule as well, when I end up with two that are closer together than I would expect. So I'm just going to keep drawing these lines, one after another, until I reach the bottom of the page. A final few tiny little white V's in the sky should be enough to indicate those little gannets on their little gannet colony. For my next painting, I'm just creating a little area of land at the bottom of the painting. This one is going to be mainly sky. So I'm starting by using this greeny grey colour, which is called Terre Verte, and then I'm just splashing in a few darker areas in indigo. Doing that all while it's still wet. And then I add that greeny colour into the sky again. I start by putting a wash of it along the top and then adding water. Coming in with some streaks of colour and then alternating that with water. And I want to bring the sky down to the land while the land is still wet and allow the areas to touch and them to join together. But I do want to leave a few little white gaps in that line to really emphasise that the hilltop and the difference between the land and the sky. I drop in a few little areas of Paynes Grey because I want my land to be darker than the sky. And then just touch in a little bit more water to the sky where I want it to be. I want the paint to flow a little bit more. It takes quite a while for all of this wet paint to dry. But when it does, I want to come in and add a little bit of detail. In order to make the land darker, I take my fine liner pen and I just draw very, very simple vertical stripes from the top to the bottom. Like in the previous painting, these vertical stripes, I quite like that they are a little bit wobbly and very obviously hand-drawn. And with these ones, I'm doing them a little bit more quickly. So I know that some will be closer together than others. Some areas there'll be bigger gaps, and then in others they'll be closer together. For this painting I want to recreate a scene that I saw in real life on a walk. We went to Linlithgow, and as we were driving there, saw a number of those kind of V's of geese flying through the sky, and thought they might be flying south for the winter. But instead, they seemed to be going north. So I wondered what was going on. That afternoon, as we walked around the loch, we saw more and more geese gathering, more of those little V's heading in to the hill across from where we were watching, until there were hundreds and hundreds of geese, grey-lag geese I'm told, circling in the sky above us. So that's what I'm drawing here. These tiny little marks, just drawing in the birds, starting with one V of birds and then adding another and another. And I spent quite a while just drawing little birds, maybe going over the top. But I wanted to recreate that feeling of more and more geese arriving for this great kind of meeting of the birds. For my third painting, I'm going back to the sea and the sky. I've drawn in a pencil line with a ruler for a horizon this time. And I'm painting it just with a quite a light wash of grey paint on this one. This paint here is a mix of whatever was left on my palette. So all of those greens and greys that you saw earlier on, just mix them all together. And I added in a little bit of Hematite Genuine, which is sort of like a gritty black colour that should give it a nice bit of texture. For the sky on this one, I wanted to add a little bit more interest. So I'm starting by painting with a paler version of that greeny blue colour. Again, a mix of things that were left on my palette, with quite a bit of water this time. And then I add in slightly darker areas. Some Paynes Grey. Just wiggling my brush around in the top half of the sky. And then in the bottom, doing some like long streaky lines. You do get that effect of clouds as they're in the distance. They look kind of like much longer and thinner, and then the ones that you see like right above you look much more fluffy and rounded. So I pretty much paint in the sky with mostly water, and then I add long, thin, streaky lines into the wet background, with just a little bit of that Paynes Grey mix. And as I go up the page this time, I start adding in a few more wiggles. Creating some darker, more kind of almost stormy feeling clouds above. And for this one I'm going to keep it really simple. Again, I want to add some really simple mark making. So I'm taking that fine liner pen and drawing along the horizon line, and then a number of lines below it. If I leave a few little gaps in the lines, then that's absolutely fine. And again, I want them to look hand-drawn, and a little bit wobbly is okay. So again, I'm just going to keep going with the lines until I reach the bottom of the page. For this one, I do contemplate adding some more birds into the sky, but I decide that I quite like it as it is. I quite like just the subtleness of the clouds and creating quite an empty, sparse painting, really. I hope that feeling is emphasised by these big white borders that I've left in the paper. The tape's done a really good job of keeping my edges nice and clean. And I'm just really careful to pull it back gently so I don't rip any of the pages and ruin my paintings. So thanks very much for watching today. I really hope that you've enjoyed these, and I hope that you give them a go. And I hope that you use them to inspire your own minimal landscape paintings. I'd be interested to know what colours would evoke the mood and the places near where you live, and how you'd represent moments that you've experienced out in the wild in watercolour and pen. So thanks once again, and hope to see you in another video very soon. Bye.